Hello everyone, my name is 𝗍𝗫 and I'm the Artistic Director of Aksioma Institute for Contemporary Art, Ljubljana. I'm delighted to be back in action with a new streaming event. At the beginning of the summer, we broadcast the live conversation between the film director 𝗏𝗏 and the writer Weizenbaum made on the occasion of the Slovenian premiere of the documentary movie 𝗏𝗏, a political thriller about artificial intelligence, power and social control. You can find the documentation of this conversation in the link here below. Today we resume the streaming program, continuing with the same theme, but this time taking a comic as a starting point. We Need to Talk AI is the title of the comic essay on artificial intelligence that came out from the collaboration between the comic essayist and academic Julia Schneider and the graphic designer and visual artist Lena Ziegel. This pioneering comic essays on AI invites you on an illustrated journey through the dimensions and implications of this groundbreaking technology. Discussing important changes and risks associated with AI, this work is a creative stimulus for insiders of the subject as well as an invitation for newbies to get informed and join the debate. This work was published in Berlin in 2019 under a Creative Commons license and can be downloaded for free from the project website. In June 2020, Aksioma, together with the Youth and Cultural Center in Maribor, published the Slovenian translation of the comic in the framework of 𝗏𝗏 platform for contemporary investigative art, with the idea of distributing it as a free educational material in schools and libraries throughout Slovenia. So keep an eye on the 𝗏𝗏's website to stay up to date on promotional and distribution activities of the Slovenian printed copies. If instead you are looking for the free PDF, you can get it on our website. But now, without further ado, let me introduce you the speakers we invited today. Dr. Julia Schneider, one of the two authors of the We Need to Talk AI, is a former independent consultant for artificial intelligence and in the field of economics, innovation, and data science. She received her doctorate in economics from the Free University Berlin for her research on the effect of the 2005 German labor market reforms on welfare recipients' behavior and health. After that, she worked as a postdoctoral researcher in the field of empirical labor market and innovation research and as a senior data strategist. Nika Mahnič is a published researcher, writer, activist, curator of the Grounded Festival in Ljubljana, co-founder of the Danes je nov dan Institute that focuses on digital political participation, transparency, and public oversight. Currently, she is a PhD student in politics at Queen Mary University of London. Before leaving them the stage, I would like to tell you that exceptionally today's streaming event does not include a final Q&A session. For this reason, the online chat, which normally allows you to interact with us and participate in the debate, has not been activated. Julia, Nika, welcome. Thanks a lot for accepting my invitation. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Janus, for the invitation and the opportunity to talk to Julia. I'm really happy that this comic was translated into Slovenian, and I'm looking forward to all the other versions because this is published in Creative Commons format. We can expect many versions, and perhaps Julia would tell us something more about the current translations that are being worked on. So what I found on the website is that by July 2020, there were 3 more language versions. The original is in English, and there are also German, Spanish, and of course Slovenian. And it's written that more than 30,000 people have read and shared the comic online, and about 1,500 ordered the comic in German or English. So thank you, Julia, for your work first of all. And I'm very much interested in the way you approach dissemination of this comic. So how you want it to, where in which kind of institutions you want it to be disseminated, like educational institutions, high schools, universities, or perhaps like elderly homes. That would be my first question to you. And yeah, thank you for joining us.
Okay. So thank you, Nika. Thank you for interviewing me today. You have a pretty impressive CV. As I saw on the internet, and I'm really happy to share with you some thoughts on AI and maybe some some progress we could make with AI or some dangers it presents to us. And thank you, Yanis and Marcela and Aksioma for translating the comic into Slovenian. I think it really looks fascinating, the Slovenian language and the pictures. I'm really looking very much forward to coming to you in person sometime and visiting you and seeing how it's life now in Slovenia after Corona. Okay, so back to your question. Actually, we relied on the internet for the dissemination. We offered the first version in English. AI, and we need to talk. AI is the original name title of the comic essay, and the idea was to many persons as possible worldwide. And as English is the most spoken language, it was just the first shot we did. So we both are not native speakers, and I'm pretty sure you noticed that if you're a native speaker, you see, okay, this is not a native English, but it works, so people can understand us. And now as you mentioned, there are more and more translations. At the moment, we just received the 5th translation into Turkish. We also have Spanish and English and German and Slovenian. And now people are working on the French version, and maybe there will also an Arab version. Let's see. It would also be nice actually to have a Chinese version, but yeah, this is future ideas. Yeah, and as you already mentioned, there were many people downloading it in the internet from our website. And one important thing was that we had, from the beginning on, we had one team member who is not mentioned on the title, 𝗟𝗲𝗋𝗋, and he did the PR, the media work for the comic. And this was really, really important because people started getting interested when the big newspapers started to present the comic and talked about the comic.
Was there any idea to kind of incorporate this into any school curricula? Or like, do you want in future to kind of approach educational institutions with that? Or is that something that you're not focusing on at the moment, or like for the time being?
Actually, the educational institutions did it for themselves. Nika, the idea when I wrote this comic essay was not this huge success that it's now. I was just wanting to make a comic about AI for me and maybe 200 friends who are interested. And it was not the idea that there will be 30,000 people reading it worldwide. I mean, it was just not, I was not able to imagine the success of the comic. So it was rather a surprise for us. And now there are many schools and universities and hospitals and all kinds of educational institutions asking us and using it for their work, teachers using it for their work. And we're really happy about that.
What about the hospitals? And is there any specific manner in which they approach you, or specific interest?
There's, for example, one hospital in Berlin. It's called the Charité, and it's a quite renowned in Berlin and Germany and worldwide. And they use it for their students to learn AI.
Okay, nice. Yeah, it's really the kind of work that is great for like beginners or like people who don't really know anything about AI. And it also opens up a lot for people who are like reading about AI. Like I mean, I'm researching this topic for some time now, but I still like found like it's very interesting because the way you talk about it is really opens up a lot of new venues. At the same time, it closes some venues. So like I'm really interested in the way like certain different different organizations, or perhaps not only countries, or like not only languages, approach these issues differently, or perhaps how it will be remixed. I think this is going to be really interesting to see in the future. So talking about institutions, like you also mentioned in your comment that, of course, institutions are undergoing great changes, the so-called digitalization, or like perhaps like, I'm not sure if we can call it the switch to 4.0 industry. And I'm not talking only about industry now, but as it's a German way of talking about it, I thought maybe to use it. So you write in the comic that it might not be worth it, that digitalization is not necessarily like something that is good for for all the institutions. So I wonder whether you thought about what would be the fields or institutions that should not really digitalize as fast as they are digitalizing, or perhaps automate certain parts of their processes or structures. Do you have any specific fields in mind?
This is an interesting question, Nika, because first of all, I think it's a misunderstanding. Maybe it's a translational problem, because actually I wrote it might be worth it that they undergo digital change. And maybe there's a switch in the translation, because in the last picture of this page, we show a former mall where there was a lot of commercial offerings before, and now maybe after the digitalization and everybody buying online, it's a social center. So this was the idea, that the digitalization of analog places could not only be a risk but also be a chance for us. Nevertheless, the question that you posed is interesting. Are there places, analog places, that should not be digitalized? And I think also regarding our last months, I'm not sure how it was for you with lockdown in Slovenia and COVID-19, but in Germany we had like 3 or 4 months where people were really not meeting a lot. They were at home, in home office. There were no cultural meetings. So people really started complaining that they miss other people, that they miss the contact, they miss the bodies, that they miss the feeling of, and the senses of meeting somebody. And I think this cannot be digitalized, actually, this meeting and using the senses, or at least at the moment. Maybe in 20 years it's totally wrong what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was thought maybe we're going to talk about him also later, but I found it interesting. Weizenbaum said that respect, understanding, and love are not technical problems. The doors are kind of not really the field, so that should not be digitalized, but like when it comes, when in the exchange, we are exchanging respect, understanding, or love, like this is not something that, well, in a book that was written or published in 1976, I think, that was back then, in his opinion, what he thought that should not maybe undergo that kind of change. I'm wondering, so different communities, especially minorities, and also we can say the poor, which is not a minority, increasingly not a minority, they feel the effect of IT on their lives very differently. And this is something that is kind of like with the role of tech ethics and data ethics and so on, this is becoming more like talked about. There are also some advisors talking to the people who produce systems to actually take this into account. So also in the comic, it's written sometimes that AI is set to benefit us all, or us as like kind of like a unified whole. This is only some parts in the comic when I saw that the word "we" is used. And of course, in your comic, you really address questions of race and questions of gender in different ways. And I'm just wondering, how do you approach, or how did you approach in your work questions of like intersectionality in a way, or like in your work as a data scientist, how did you try to perhaps embed fairness in your systems, or like on your everyday basis, in your everyday work, to address those questions?
For the question, I find this really interesting. First of all, as a data scientist, I was at a senior level at the data scientists, and the place where I worked was pretty intersectional concerning country of origin and gender. So there were quite a few women and not only German men, let's say it. Let's put it like this. Nevertheless, we had also, I would say, discrimination concerning gender. And the good thing was that you could talk about that. And the bad thing was that you could not just make it go away. So as in our work and with each other and in the projects we did, we thought about discrimination, about fairness, but I would say that we did not succeed in really making it not happen. If
And how
it's
did
on
you
this
see it
meta
happen?
level.
How did you see it
Sorry?
happen?
I think maybe the same experiences that you often see with women in tech, that women in tech often underestimate their values. So people or female data scientists said things like, yeah, I'm not so experienced, I'm not so good as blah, blah, blah. And male data scientists often had a better, a stronger sense of capability. And it was not necessarily that an objective estimation, I would say, stuff like that. On the working level, and on the project level, it was you just met the typical structures everywhere. In tech, there were only male or mostly male workers with special or with one view on the world. Let's say it like this.
Yeah, I recently read an article about the sexism in the Berlin tech scene. And it was written that in the tech sector across Europe, only 5% of leadership positions in the digital industry are held by women. Do you see perhaps that this kind of impacts also the topics, not the topics that are dealt with, but perhaps the way in which the kind of products that are being developed? Or you saw it perhaps more in your work as the way you approach the data set? Do you see this as you said, like, how did you see this prominence of one worldview or one? What I mean here is that perhaps if you don't feel certain issues in your life, you just don't think of something as a problem. But I'm not really sure on what kind of problems you worked on as a data scientist. I'm not sure if this makes sense as a question, but did you see this as a question of what kind of products are devised or any other way?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not sure, but if you know that, but before I worked like 6 years as an innovation scientist after my PhD. And I did a lot of innovation research also on IT. And maybe you know the example of there's a breast pump when you're breastfeeding, and then you have this breast pump, and it's this story that it was developed by men, and men are not maybe those ones with the most experience in breastfeeding. So they did a hackathon, and yeah, I'm sure you know about it. And now breast pumping should be easier and better than before. And actually, this is I think, a really good example that you need diverse teams and diverse views of the world to make good innovations in the tech sector or anywhere else, I think.
So for you, it was kind of easier to enter this or to like to break the glass ceiling of tech industry because you worked kind of as an innovation scientist and before being in academia. That was kind of your way of getting in the industry.
Actually, I think also besides working hard as everybody or many people do, actually, I also had the privilege that I had parents that could pay my education. It was a long education, and I did a PhD then in quantitative microeconomics. And this is a lot of with numbers and also a lot of IT and statistics and magic. And so I think it was a bonus that helped me to do this.
We have some issues now with hearing you. Back online. So in the comic, on one of the pages, you give credit to Josef Weizenbaum that I mentioned already before because I'm a great fan of him. And he was the creator of the first chatbot, 𝗪𝗲. And I think his book, 𝗪𝗲 Human Reason, is one of the best books that talk about perhaps of also the dangers and the possibilities that computers and automation as such give to us. And something that I found interesting, and perhaps I think it's an interesting question to pose, is that he was born in Berlin to Jewish parents, and they escaped Nazi Germany in 1936. And then he became a professor at MIT. And after several years of working as a professor, he decided to leave his post and go for a kind of a sabbatical, do a PhD in philosophy. And then this book, if I understood correctly, is a product of his study that he spent researching not really only philosophy, but let's say questions of more related to social sciences and such. So do you think that it's not one or the other question that I'm posing now, but what do you think about computer scientists that do they need education also in social sciences or humanities? And I'm not talking only about ethics as part of the curricula, to be more responsible in their work? Or do you think it's as in the case of Josef Weizenbaum, just a question of some life experience? Meaning that like if somebody is experiencing discrimination in their everyday lives, or perhaps somebody who experienced exile, is living a life of questioning and countering power. So do you think it can be both, of course, but what do you think about the need for humanities education for computer scientists, for example?
Okay, interesting question. Actually, one that I asked myself a lot. And from my experience in working as in a data science company, I think that not every computer scientist is interested in social sciences. And yeah, what to do there? So I think what would be good if there are workshops at least in social sciences and humanities, and like an interim solution to be able to work more. Yeah, not more. I mean, it's not that all computer scientists work without responsibility, but if there's a lack in responsibility or in social awareness, then workshops or additional studies might help, I think.
So you're saying that you experienced, but do you think perhaps this is related to, like, maybe I'm generalizing, but in Germany questions of privacy are much more embedded, or like not embedded, but I think the focus on privacy as a right is something that is much more prominent in Germany. Do you have any experience working abroad where you have a different experience, or perhaps in the US? Like, do you think that this is like a completely different working environment and also different social context in which privacy is a right, which I guess I mean, I read like accounts that also because of the Second World War, the question of privacy, not only Second World War, also because of like the GDR and so on, like I think questions of surveillance and questions of privacy are much more prominent in Germany. But you think this is like locally specific, or like it's everywhere that like there are like more aware data scientists and less aware data scientists?
This is a good question because there are cultural differences. If you look to China, for example, and their use and embracement of AI applications, it's very much different from the experience that I make in Germany. And I don't know how it is in Slovenia. And actually, I just don't know why there are so huge differences. Apart from those, those few cliches that I have in mind, like for example, of course, in Germany we have very bad experiences with surveillance and with stigmatizing people and following them and collecting their data. It's really, I mean, you don't want, no country wants these experiences. So I can imagine that our history is one of the reasons that we in Germany are really sensitive with data protection and surveillance. And actually I am too. So yeah, it would be interesting drinking a beer and working and talking a little bit about this cultural difference that also you and me have with that. But yeah, but you know, the Shoah, I think, is such a huge example of yeah, of what can happen if the wrong people have data. That yeah, you are really aware then maybe.
So one of the things that I'm just gonna read exactly from how it's written in the comic. So when AI sorts our photos, it's easier to make a photo calendar with our children for our parents as a present. And when I read this, I remembered one story that at first it sounds quite of like not so much problematic. It's just like one, let's say, a glitch or just a feature. Sometimes a feature and a glitch can be interchangeable. And it's a story from 2015 when an AI researcher used his Google Photos and he realized that a photo was made that never happened, which is a photo of him and his wife smiling on a picture in a restaurant. And they remember, and I mean, they hoped, I guess, that their memory still works, but apparently that's really what they wrote, that they didn't smile, and they were actually making fun of this, that, oh, we're not smiling at the picture. And then he realized that in his Google Photos, there was a picture of both smiling. And then he went to research further what's the thing and realized that's actually the work of a Google 𝗏𝗏 algorithm that actually made an awesome picture, which meant like making it similar to, I think it's called not really beauty effect, but there is something like making pictures more beautiful, and that's the work of algorithms. So I think this case is very interesting in terms of like what is happening with our memories, because like we do use like, well, we do use, some people do, others don't, Google Drive, for example, for our archives. And I mean, those archives can be optimized and perhaps not to our benefit. Like it can be optimized to maybe just some random benefit of like, maybe there's no intention behind it, but it's just like the way certain optimizations have the effects that are not, well, meant to happen. So do you think we should be aware of this, like of this, how certain systems can meddle with our memory and their archives? Or like, is it that like the new literacy we have to be aware of? Like, or am I just not that I'm paranoid, but like, do you think this is just like producing too much paranoia that is maybe not that clever in terms of like there's many other issues that we should be thinking about. Yeah.
Thank you, Nika, for telling me this story, because I find that extremely, extremely exciting. Because everybody, or now I think it's common sense that memories change in your mind, in your memory, every time when you recall them, your memories change. So it's not a stable thing, right? So memories are shapeable. And just imagine, I mean, it's so fascinating and also spooky to also have like a digital manipulation of your memories. It's totally possible, and I think yeah, I think we should make art about that. This is really huge, I think, and it's part of literacy actually. And I'm really sorry we don't have a page on that in the comic. I've never thought about that until you told me the story, actually, that AI can and will shape our memories, which are not stable in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it goes with truth, and it goes with many different issues of what we're currently living and how our realities as such are like really being shaped by. Which I think is interesting, because I'm not sure if it's better if our memories are shaped by propaganda that is state propaganda or propaganda that is like fueled by corporations. I don't think there's so much difference. The only difference that I usually think of is we still get rights by states. Like human rights are kind of granted by states, not by corporations. And in that way, like I think I'm still sticking for the state as like something that gives me rights, but not. I'm not sure that. I'm not sure that this will stay like this forever, and I think we should also think about the question of power in that regard. And I mean, like also if you think about census data, which was of course very very important in what happened in the Second World War. And census as such is also something that can be manipulated with. So, yeah. But with all those like issues that we, yes.
Oh, sorry, I just you probably read 1984, maybe a few years ago or something, from George Orwell.
Yeah.
And well, there's this notion of changing your memory, and isn't it like that the book ends with the main person being shot at the moment when his memory changes and he forgets that he was treated badly? It's really, I think this is the last moment. And I when you told me the story, I was really thinking about 1984. And this is usually, you know the comic, I'm really quite more an optimist than a pessimist, but I was thinking that this is a huge thing, changing memories, changing feelings, changing opinions, and not realizing that you're being manipulated because it's so nice and so close. AI is so close to us, right? It's just a picture where we smile, so it's not evil. No.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit creepier if it happens on a smiling picture. So, yeah. But so talking about like evil technologies or something like that, I'm usually on the side of being. Sometimes recently I hear that I'm against technology. It's not that I'm against technology. I just think that there's so many bad things happening, and the discourse is so often not too positive, but positive. That's why I'm like just trying to wage it on the other side. So, and I think about there are certain technologies that I guess should be banned. I was part of the campaign against sex robots, which we were working on a ban not only for child sex dolls, but also like the sex dolls of children, but also in general, as this is being like a sexist technology. But I think this is not only the only technology that should be banned. Something happened recently in Portland, Oregon. They banned facial recognition. And it wasn't on the basis of too much technology or too much surveillance, but they used the case of like it was racist. So they use anti-racism as their case for why we should ban something. And as much as I think we should ban, I think facial recognition, that's what I believe in, even though it's becoming more and more difficult, especially after COVID-19. I think like it's difficult to ban machine vision, for example. I mean, I don't think that would make any sense, but perhaps how do you see any possibility for a concrete banning is maybe not the right word, but like what happened with facial recognition was banning, so perhaps we can still use the word. Do you see what would we need to actually construct a mechanism that would be like flexible enough to allow this to happen, to be like to recognize something as a threat, or like to find certain reasons why something is problematic, and then to actually implement it in, well, practice, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think actually it starts with awareness, actually. So giving the comic to children and young people is maybe just a little step in this direction to enable them to see what dangers and positive aspects there might be, and to invite them to think about that, to exchange, to go and exchange. And actually, I think definitely we should regulate, definitely, because we have been able to regulate nuclear bombs to a certain extent, and this is a great achievement of humanity. So we should, absolutely, we should discuss where are downsides that we do not want to have, and regulate them. I think so. But I'm not a politician. This is, of course, it has to be backed by a democratic way of regulating. But that AI, to a certain extent, should be regulated. I would say yes, definitely.
I think of all of us as citizens, as politicians in some ways, and politicians in some ways. And especially I think data scientists should be technologists, I guess, should be really like feeling themselves as, I guess, policymakers. I'm gonna focus my PhD on this topic kind of, in a way, in the ways in which political decision making is being now coded into systems. If you perhaps know the work of 𝗪𝗲 Benjamin, Race After Technology, she talks about coded inequity, how inequities in the world are being just coded, baked into the systems as such. So I think, yeah, this would be, I think we should be all kind of stepping, not all, it's difficult, like to be, the reason we have representative democracy is because we don't have time to be politically active all the time. But I do think there is like this, starting from a comic book and going further from a bottom-up perspective, like not bottom perspective, but like going further from the bottom-up grassroots political organizing. I think that's how we should do AI politics, because otherwise, if it comes top-down, the current the current situation is very much in favor of the industry, so the big tech players. So that's why I think we should all kind of like take our agency and start from there. But going back to the question, yeah, sorry.
Let me clarify on that point, because actually I'm a very political person, but I'm really happy that I'm not in a ministry working on tons and tons of papers and studies all my day, really. And my way of transporting my beliefs and of sharing my views and inviting people to exchange is doing comic books and stuff that I'm interested in, and hoping that this is a little contribution to the debate that helps us to develop ideas and better systems. Actually, this is what I believe in. And I think everybody has his or her talents, and I think I found mine. So at the moment, actually, I'm working on a comic essay on financial literacy for all, for everybody. Again, with the same approach to offer some insights and invite people to see it's not a rocket science, and they can get some issues and then they can discuss as agents and maybe make a change. So this is the idea, what I'm doing.
Okay, yeah, this is great, especially financial literacy. We worked this year on Money Lab, and I realized how much I don't know and how important it is to actually work on the questions of finance, because like it's kind of as similar to automation, is like this force that is going all over our economy, I guess, and it's important to know what is happening.
Yeah, and something else, Nika, more than with AI, where we know it's new, people offering money is something natural, like rain or something. And this is something I'm really interested in, that because rain you cannot change, and something that we do and build and rebuild every day, you can change. And this is what I'm interested in. You know?
So going back to the question of surveillance, you write in the comic, the AI can translate our movement patterns to little stick figures. Once registered, the AI can even identify us behind a wall, which is something I think many people don't know or like are not even thinking about, and it makes I guess moving around in public space or like private spaces as well kind of creepy. So I think it's really important to talk about surveillance, and in the comic you refer to the work of Shoshana Zuboff, the author of The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And one of the things, or one of the aspects she talks about, is the right to future tense. And I quote, so our futures are being endangered by a pervasive digital architecture of behavior modification owned and operated by surveillance capital, necessitated by its economic imperatives. And she talks here about the right to future tense. And it's kind of related to privacy, but do you think we should renew our conceptions of privacy to make them more like understandable, or like more, because privacy is very abstract in a way, and I sometimes think of privacy and intimacy as related terms. And do you have any idea of like how to think of privacy, or do you don't see any need perhaps to to find new terms if perhaps they're not needed? I don't know.
I think actually I saw that you did one of the festivals you did was AI and intimacy, right? So I thought this is an interesting coupling to explore the relation between intimacy and AI, and I would love to have been there actually. And regarding privacy, as I said, I think what's really interesting is the different conceptions and relevance of privacy in different countries. And in Germany, there are a lot of people concerned with privacy. And maybe it's a different notion in our heads than maybe in the States, or maybe in Austria or in China. So I'm not exactly sure if we all mean the same when we say privacy. So maybe I think I would like to talk more about control as the other side of privacy. And I think that AI has the danger of creating absurd control scenarios. And there I'm hoping and counting on the inventiveness of people, actually, on the creativity of people. So on tutorials on YouTube, for example, where they show how to paint your face, for example, that the AI cannot detect you as detect your face, for example. This is what I'm really happy, that people are so creative and just and play with control scenarios. And I'm really hoping that there's enough creativity in our societies to deal with the amount of control AI is able to to offer the state and the government and the companies. On the other hand, I don't know if you also know there's a tale, the fable of a frog. If you put a frog into boiling water, the frog will immediately jump out, right? And if you put a frog in cold water, the frog stays in the water. And if you then heat the water, the frog stays in the water and then dies. So maybe we all are also in this water, in this slowly heating pot, and nobody finds it as strange anymore that they can be predicted and controlled by our data, and it's so normal that we just are getting used to it. So I'm not sure if there's enough creativity and resistance actually to control, or if we're just getting used to it and then we don't have rights that were important in former societies. I'm not sure, but I'm hoping for creativity.
Yeah, I mean, I usually think of like there should be both individual approaches to countering power and systemic approaches, and I really think that it's not on us as citizens only to counter this, and expect also political representatives to become more literate in the questions of like how information technology is kind of like overcoming their own jobs and automating their own jobs as well. So I think this maybe if we kind of like put a little bit of this fear factor, maybe this will do something. I mean, like currently Germany and Slovenia are one of the presidential countries of the EU, and one of the topics is AI. So perhaps maybe we can we can change or steer the debate as well, and let's hope for this, I guess. And so something that you also mention in the comic is the energy issue, or the problem with I guess energy inefficiency, or like not really inefficiency, but the energy cost. And in late 2019, some researchers analyzed various natural language processing training models, and they estimated the energy cost in kilowatts, to that estimation of how much we need of this to train those models. So they estimated that to train one single big language model equals 300,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions. And just to put it, they put it into this more like shocking comparison, which is 125 round-trip flights between New York and Beijing, which is quite a lot if you think about it. I mean, in terms of, yes, we can get a lot from it, but it's just training one single NLP model. And also in the comic you write, today data centers use more energy than some countries. And do you have perhaps any idea how to like think about this question? Like I thought about perhaps the indication of like energy efficiency or energy inefficiency of like certain data models or like algorithms, similarly to like what we have on electronic appliances. When you buy a fridge or when you move into a specific building, you will always kind of see the energy efficiency. And there are similar ideas with kind of regulating AI similarly than we do with medicines, in terms of what is the prediction, or not prediction, what is the predicted effect of what you put into your life, similar to nutritional labels in a way. So what do you think about this question of like the carbon footprint of this? Do you think like how to work with this question? Because like on the other hand, those models are used to also work on the questions of climate change, which I find quite bizarre in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
the question of climate is was one of the most interesting ones for me actually in the comic. And I did a lot of research on it, and I found it, I found it really bizarre that been used for good things and also using so much energy that you cannot believe it actually if you hear it the first time. So actually, I think that power is too cheap, and that the market cannot solve this. Even if one believes in efficient markets and capitalism, I think the environmental effects of using so much energy are not paid for by the AI companies or by the AI users. So I think actually, again, you need to regulate that. If you regulate it with like you said, with A, B, 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 like in Germany, you have on your fridge, you have different indicators of energy use. If you regulate it like this or not, this is not my cup of tea how to regulate it, but I think you need to regulate it. And the other day when I mean, this is not only the case with AI, it's also the case with all the blockchains, right? So it's incredible how much energy one Bitcoin costs. And so why? I mean, is it, I'm not against Bitcoins, but I think we should really take into account how much energy IT and IT processing costs.
Yeah, first we need to start talking about it, and this comic was, I mean, is a great way to start, and I guess because like this is really something that usually, well, we don't think about. I mean, if you do research on this topic, yes, you think about it, but like, especially if AI is being presented as the solution to so many problems, of course, you wouldn't take into consideration that in times of climate change, perhaps this is one of the big drivers of it as well. Not really drivers, but it's kind of related in a way. Before our screening of 𝗓𝗓𝗔 documentary in July, we hosted a conversation with the director 𝗏𝗏 and one of the special guests in our studio asked Tonya which values should AI be aligned with. And I wonder what you think about it as a data scientist. Like, do you, I mean, not as a data scientist, but as someone who knows how to work with databases and how to work with AI. How do you think of like the, let's say, value pyramid in a way? Should we think about it? Should we fix this? Should we think of human rights as something that is relevant? Do you have any idea about it?
Absolutely. This is why we wrote this lengthy manifesto at the end. Not because we have so many answers, but because we think questioning AI in different ways is really important. And I think in a nutshell, I think it's important that it's safe, it's beneficial, and it's fair to everybody actually. And in German, you say the devil is in the detail. So how can we do this? How can we make AI safe and beneficial and fair for all the society, and taking into account the effects on nature, on climate? There are a few answers and a few visions in the comic, but it's by far not the end of the story. So I would like to give the question back to you, Nika, and back to all the readers and listeners. What can AI help us with, and what do you think? Where should we pay attention, and what are important values for us, for humanity, and how could we make sure that they are embedded in AI? Because AI will not go away.
I like the idea of, I think it's Helen Nussbaum, who talks about contextual integrity and a perception of privacy that is context related, which is just like kind of simple in a way that like if you put something, a system that oversees a certain group of alive beings, then those alive beings have to know what is happening to them or with them and with their data. And I think if we embed privacy as it's a human right, one of the human rights, if we embed privacy as a starting point and not surveillance as a starting point, that maybe we can like start from a good that's a good starting point, I think. And currently, if the industry would not start from surveillance as their business model and start from privacy by design as the business model, I think that would be great. Which would also mean that many of the models that are currently in use and that need a lot of data, and many of the sensors that they're planning to actually input in our communities, those ideas of smart cities and so on should kind of be not eliminated, but like focused on our lives as citizens who have the right to, I guess, privacy, and the future tense in terms of like having actually not only GDPR as something that helps us with how to take control over our data, which increasingly is our lives digitized, and after COVID-19 even more, but to know how we are being steered and how we're being manipulated and how this is affecting our chances. So for me, concretely, what I think could be done, or where AI could be useful, as something that kind of shows certain processes, like it shows inequalities, it shows the traces of where inequalities are, but then also the next step would be to give the people, or give the communities that are impacted, the power to actually do something about it. I mean, I would love to have algorithms that show me, for example, what would be for me a sensible way to I don't know, perhaps prepare a dish if I don't really know how well to cook really well. At the same time, like take into account local produce, or like local farmers, for example. And I guess there might be some algorithms that could help us think about supply chains and actually to be responsible towards the not really local environment, but like I guess the climate and so on. So I think for me, surveillance and privacy is some like and having control over something that having control over our lives and our digital footprints. I guess this is, yeah.
From a data science perspective, what really would be good if you have data to play around with. This is a problem when you work with data. You want to have data. This is so simple. It's as simple as it is. You just want to have data. So in my data science company, for example, when there was this new regulation with data, what's it called in English? The
GDPR.
GDPR, yeah. dsgvo in German. When it came, then and it was a German politician that really, created it actually. And when people in my data science company had to deal with it, they were like, yeah, maybe it's cool, but we don't have the data we want, and our models are not working so good anymore. So they were disappointed, right? And this is something that you find a lot in when you meet people who work with data, that they're disappointed when they don't have the data that they would love to have, that they have like an effect. And I did my PhD, for example, in labor economics, right? And in Germany, you have really strong regulations with data on health, right? And in Denmark, for example, you have everything you can ever dream of. And we just envied all the researchers of Denmark who having all the data, right? And at the same time thinking, oh my God, they have all the data. So what I think is important, that you have enough data that is really anonymous, right? That you can build models and that you can find effects, but that privacy at the same time is secured. That is something that I think we as societies have to work on. How can we guarantee this, that you, Nika, and I are safe, and we can do whatever we want and go and talk to people we want and talk stuff we want and think stuff we want, etc. And at the same time that AI workers can work with data and help us in many ways. I was on this panel actually also with a woman from Charité, right, from the hospital I mentioned, and they from the AI section. And they said the problem is, for example, in Germany, you have large privacy issues and we don't have a lot of data about children. So children get the wrong medicine because the medicine tests are only with males, with adult males, right? We don't have enough data. So they would really love to lessen the privacy issues in Germany, to have more data on children and the side effects of medicine, etc. So if you are a mother of a child that has a certain need of medication, you certainly are pro data and against privacy in this situation. And I think we should take this serious. We should take the wish serious to have some answers, and at the same time find creative ways on how to be able to give data without surveillance of everybody all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, that's in a way a great point to finish, because now we know that we have a lot of work to do. I was really enjoying this conversation. I think it was very productive also because I come from this very sometimes too negative point, and for me talking to a person who is happy to work with data, and it's really, I think this is really where we can have really productive conversations. I'm looking forward to hear more of your work, and for more financial literacy would be also good for me. And thank you for today. And perhaps I would give the word to Jannis.
Thank you, Nika. And thanks to you as well, Julia, for sharing with us your thoughts on this highly topical issue that increasingly needs, in my opinion, to be placed in the center of public debate. I would like to remind our audience online that the English and the Spanish version of the comic essays that inspired today's conversation is available online for free at weneedtotalk.ai, while the Slovenian PDF can be found on the Aksioma website. For the printed Slovenian versions instead, keep an eye on the CONS website. If you're interested in this type of content, I invite you to take a look at our YouTube and Vimeo channels and to follow us on social media to stay updated on our activities and cultural proposals. Thanks for being with us today. This is all from Ljubljana. Nasvidenje.